Hey there. This is another anti-Elon Musk and anti-Tesla episode. This will be the last one in a while, I promise. Probably. Maybe. No promises. I swear this isn't just an Elon Musk hate channel, although it certainly is an Elon Musk hate channel. The man just makes it so easy to hate him, you know? So, subscribe for a regular dose of Elon hate. Although I have been told to please leave the poor baby boy billionaire Elon Musk alone. And you know what? I'm a romantic at heart and wouldn't want to get in the way of anyone's pursuit of a beautiful parasocial romance with Elon Musk. But I did need to talk about this, so just one more episode about Elon, okay? I mean, assuming he doesn't do or say anything stupid in 2024. As an addendum to my video titled Lords and Peasants, I feel that I need to talk about the Tesla employment contracts in Sweden and Tesla's attempt to scare employees and their families into silence. If you haven't watched that episode yet, no worries, as it's not essential to understand this one. But if you want to know more about the Tesla strike in Sweden, the history of the Swedish labor movement, how the Nordic model functions, and why collective bargaining is important for workers everywhere, I would highly recommend watching Lords and Peasants next. Anyway, let's get started. It's been reported starting right around the time that I finished up my video on the Swedish Tesla strike that Tesla's employment contracts in Sweden are remarkable. That is, remarkable in a bad sense and in the Swedish market. It was Dagens Nyheter, DN, who got their hands on some of these contracts in the midst of the strike against Tesla and broke the news on December 19th, 2023. They reported that the employment contracts can be 40 to 70 pages long, be written in obscure legal jargon in English, remember, Swedish workers, and contain clauses about lifelong confidentiality and so-called non-compete clauses stipulating that the Tesla employees would have to pay damages to Tesla if they took a job at a rival company within 6 months of working at Tesla. Lena Meyer Söderberg, who serves as general counsel at the legal bureau of the Swedish Trade Union Confederation, told DN that there's a clause stipulating that if an employee invents something, even in their free time, their invention now belongs to Tesla with no rights whatsoever to the person who actually made the invention. She said that, quote, in practice, it can mean a collection of poems that someone wrote in their spare time, end quote. Just think about that for a moment. That's crazy. And combine that with the legal threat of being sued by the world's wealthiest man if you break confidentiality and speak out about these contracts, you can quickly gain an understanding of just why it's so easy for Elon to take credit for all the work that his employees actually did. Like, yeah, Elon Musk is totally, definitely inventing electric cars and rockets. All by himself, in fact. I'm not a legal expert myself. I'm just some guy on the internet with left-wing political opinions. So I can't say exactly how much of these contracts are actually legally enforceable in Sweden, but from what I can gather based on interviews with lawyers on the topic, these contracts would probably not hold up very well in court. For example, that thing about Tesla owning employees' inventions with absolutely no rights or compensation to the inventor, unenforceable according to Bengt Domey, professor of civil law, who told DN that the right to fair compensation, quote, cannot be signed away, end quote. Indeed, courtesy of DN, I have a few quotes from other lawyers and labor market experts on how ridiculous these contracts are. For starters, if you watched my episode on the Tesla strike, You may remember the union IF Metall that is organizing the strike against Tesla. Darko Davidovic, a lawyer who works for this union, told DN that the contracts are not fair or reasonable and that, quote, ordinary folk should not need to do a legal analysis of their employment contracts, end quote. Furthermore, Petra Hirschfeldt Olsson, a professor of labor law at Stockholm University, told DN that the contracts are deeply flawed because employment contracts, according to Swedish law, need to be plainly understood by those who sign them. If you ask me, legal jargon in a non-native language spanning 70 pages certainly does not meet this requirement. But here's the thing to remember, and this is the same in the US, where these types of contracts are more common. Whether or not they are legally enforceable in court is sort of immaterial to the situation. That's not their main purpose, which is to frighten employees into compliance and silence, to convince the individual workers that they have no rights because they signed them away. Because workers are not all lawyers with the education, expertise, and experience to understand contracts such as these and whether or not they're legally enforceable, or if some parts are legally enforceable and others are not. I actually kind of love these contracts. Not in and of themselves, of course, but because they perfectly illustrate the main point my last video on the Tesla strike was about, namely the inherent adversarial relationship between labor and capital, employees and employers, as well as the imbalanced power dynamic between the two, where capital has a lot more power and leverage than labor, unless labor band together to form a union. These contracts perfectly encapsulate, in a mere 70 pages, why collective bargaining is such an important aspect of labor rights. Without unions and collective bargaining, the employer holds all the power and employees almost none. My own employment contract is 1 page, 1. Although most of the specifics that would be in a contract are instead in the collective bargaining agreement that my union negotiated on my behalf as well as on behalf of other workers. You know, the bulk of what could be considered my employment contract was negotiated by people with experience and legal expertise that I don't have, backed by the collective power of the many, many thousands of people who are in the union, as well as by the power of the many other unions in Sweden who could, if need be, assist with sympathy measures during a strike, as we've seen during this strike. And not just in Sweden, but in Finland, Denmark, Norway, and potentially the rest of the world, depending on labor laws, of course. Solidarity is essential between workers and across borders. Out of a fairness principle, I'll include that Tesla told DN that their contracts are, quote, equivalent or better, end quote, than the collective bargaining agreements negotiated by unions. But this, as we've learned, is plainly not true, and if it were true, there should be nothing stopping Tesla from signing a collective bargaining agreement with the union, as is the custom of the Swedish labor market. Now that we've talked about the employment contracts, whose main purpose, in my opinion, is to frighten employees into subordination, I'd next like to move to a story reported by Aftonbladet on December 23rd, 2023. Because Tesla using its power and leverage over workers in order to frighten them into compliance is exactly what this story is about. Aftonbladet reported that Janis Kuzma, a Tesla employee who is currently on strike, was called up by his boss and an HR rep to discuss his wife's tweets. Yes, you heard that right. His wife's tweets. Quote, "We have seen what your wife has written about Tesla on X. It's not quite okay," end quote, they allegedly told him. It turns out that his wife has shared her thoughts about the Tesla strike as well as details on how overtime pay works at her husband's job. It's especially with that last part that Tesla takes issue because in their minds, it's a breach of their 70-page employment contract. specifically the lifelong so-called confidentiality clause. What really cracked me up while reading the article by Aftonbladet was the account of a meeting between Janis IF Metall lawyer Darko Davidovic and Tesla representatives. Janis told Aftonbladet, quote, "I said during the meeting that X is a platform that advocates for free speech. So why is it a problem that my wife writes this? But they reply that you are a Tesla employee, your wife is associated with you, and you have the same last name. You can talk about your perspective and your feelings, but not what is happening at the company." End quote. Darko told Aftonbladet about the confidentiality clause in the employment contracts that, quote, "not even the Tesla representative could explain what is okay to say," end quote. He went on to say, quote, "Then I asked the question if the employment contract is not written for the American market, and they admitted that, yes, it is. I replied that in Sweden we have freedom of speech, and that the conditions in a workplace can never be confidential. Then they said that, yes, of course freedom of speech must apply." End quote. Darko finally concludes that his judgment as a lawyer is that Tesla, quote, "cannot succeed with this contract," end quote, and that Tesla's employment contracts can trump the Swedish constitution. Okay, that's about the gist of the Aftonbladet article. There's a bit more there, but we have the most important and relevant information and quotes. And there's a lot to say about this. The first point I'd like to make here is to reaffirm my point in the last section of the video, that Tesla employs scare tactics against their employees to scare them into compliance. As was clear in the last section and in this section, based on quotes by legal professionals in Sweden, the employment contracts would not hold up in court, because that's not really what they're supposed to do, except maybe as a Hail Mary. The primary purpose of these psychotic 70-page employment contracts is to scare and keep in line workers at Tesla, which kind of makes Elon Musk's comment about there not being lords and peasants at Tesla even more absurd, in addition to all the reasons I explained in my Lords and Peasants video. The second thing to comment on here is, of course, free speech. Because Tesla is directly trying to infringe on their employees' right to free speech using legal threats, at the same time as Elon Musk is justifying his unbanning and signal boosting of neo-Nazis on Twitter by using exactly that pretext. Free speech. Elon Musk, like a lot of other fascists, argues in favor of fascism not by directly saying what he believes, but instead by defending other fascists under the pretense of free speech. Like a lot of fascists, he employs the free speech dog whistle in all manner of situations, even when it's not remotely a free speech issue. Like claiming that Disney pulling ads from Twitter is a violation of free speech, somehow. Or claiming that receiving pushback from other people using their free speech is somehow a violation of free speech or an attack on free speech. Again, somehow. Yet, Tesla employees do not get to enjoy the same free speech absolutism that Elon Musk is preaching for neo-Nazis on Twitter. So I guess my questions for Elon, and anyone defending him and Tesla at this point, would be these. Are you a free speech absolutist or aren't you? Or does free speech only apply to neo-Nazis on Twitter and not Tesla employees? I'd like to cap off this episode with some final Elon Musk and Tesla bashing, just to get it out of my system so that maybe, possibly, I can talk about something else. Please just indulge me a little bit. You know as well as I do how easy Elon is making it to hate him right now. In fact, Elon Musk has made it a habit of his to just outright signal boost and agree with neo-Nazis and fascists spreading racist narratives about immigrants and trans people. As I said in my video, Elon Musk is losing it, It's rather clear that Elon has chosen to surround himself with hateful and bad people, and has become a hateful and bad person himself. I mean, even more hateful and bad than when he was just a ruthless capitalist. Courtesy of Evan on Twitter, who seems to be as big an Elon hater as myself, I've seen Elon Musk agree with everything from white replacement theory to narratives exaggerating the problem with anti white racism or downplaying the problem with racism and white supremacy, to narratives about how black people and immigrants are dirty and violent. You know, just the classics of racism, really. But I guess that shouldn't be surprising coming from an out of touch billionaire who grew up as a rich white kid in apartheid South Africa. Furthermore, I saw this video clip on Twitter of some person driving a Cybertruck. First, they signal in the wrong direction and then drive across 2 lanes to make the exit in the last second. Really great and safe driving behavior right there. But what can you expect from the kind of sycophant that would actually get a Cybertruck, the ugliest vehicle in the world, at a time when Elon Musk is very publicly coming out of the neo-Nazi closet? You'd think someone who styles himself as a free speech warrior and a man of the people wouldn't very obviously abuse his power over workers just because they say things that he disagrees with. But you'd be wrong if you thought that. Fortune reported on January 3rd, 2024, hey, that's this year, that the US National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, is accusing SpaceX of illegally firing 8 employees after they criticized Elon and called him a, quote, distraction and embarrassment, end quote. The article states that the NLRB, quote, issued a complaint against SpaceX Wednesday, alleging that the company illegally interrogated, surveilled, and retaliated against workers, end quote. And that, quote, the fired workers include authors of a 2022 open letter protesting inappropriate, disparaging, sexually charged comments on Twitter by Musk, end quote. The article also quotes one of the workers, Paige Holland Thielen, who said in an email, quote, at SpaceX the rockets may be reusable, but the people who build them are treated as expendable, end quote. During his interview at the 2023 Dealbook Summit, Elon Musk made comments about not liking any system that creates lords and peasants, claiming that's his rationale for opposing unions. But these comments seem to ring kind of hollow, don't they? As do his calls for free speech, given the fact that he habitually lords his power over workers as a means to silence them and keep them in line, not to mention punish them for using their free speech to criticize him. Elon Musk never believed in free speech, and he most certainly never opposed a system of lords and peasants. In fact, he relies on such a system, and he is desperately trying to prevent labor from organizing, because that would be a threat to his power, to his lordship. Lastly, I read this article by the Daily Mail. I read this article published on December 26, 2023 by the Daily Mail, titled Tesla Robot Attacks an Engineer at Company's Texas Factory During Violent Malfunction. The article goes on to detail how the robot pinned a Tesla employee, quote, before sinking its metal claws into the worker's back and arm, leaving a trail of blood along the factory surface, end quote. To add proper context, Elon Musk has claimed on Twitter that this is a 2-year-old incident at this point, implying that it therefore isn't relevant because it's not about the latest model of Tesla robot or whatever. But what stuck out to me in the article was one banger of a line. Quote, according to Tesla, the engineer's wounds required 0 days off from work for recovery, end quote. 0 days. after being attacked in such a way as to leave a trail of blood. I feel like the complete disregard for workers' physical as well as mental well being, is endemic to the American labor market broadly, but Tesla is at the forefront of this injustice, as the same article illustrates when it claims that, quote, a ratio of nearly 1 out of every 21 workers at Tesla's Giga Texas factory was injured on the job in 2022, compared to an industry median rate of 1 in every 30 workers. End quote. The safety standard of the industry broadly is already unconscionable, but of course Tesla is much worse. It is this disregard for human life and dignity that Elon Musk and Tesla want to bring to Sweden. And that is why I despise them with every fiber of my being. That is why I support the Swedish strike against Tesla, and why you should too. That is why I am in a union and support unions, and why you should do the same. That is why collective bargaining is so important. For some workers, it can actually be the difference between life and death. Anyway, thanks for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you enjoy the video and my other content, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Any and all help to grow the channel would be greatly appreciated. If you would like to know more about why Elon Musk is terrible, I recommend my video, Elon Musk is Losing It. Or if you would like to know more about the Swedish strike against Tesla, you should check out my video titled Lords and Peasants, the Tesla Strike and the Importance of Collective Bargaining. With that said, I hope the new year is treating you well so far, and hopefully we'll see more of each other in the coming months and years. I have a lot of stuff I want to talk about, so subscribe and stick around.